My name is Julian Hart, and for the better part of 8 years, I've been a ghost in my own marriage. Not because I was absent, not because I didn't care, because invisibility was the role I was cast in, and for a long time, I played it well. To most of my wife's world, I was Myra's husband, a vague accessory to her fast-moving life. At events, her coworkers barely acknowledged me beyond a polite nod or a distracted handshake. Her friends smiled past me. Her assistants never bothered to learn my name. Myra never corrected them, and I never asked her to. That was fine with me. I didn't need the spotlight. I never cared about the glitz or being anyone's talking point. I preferred quiet corners and real conversations, the kind you only get when no one's watching you. Silence had always been my advantage. It gave me space to observe, to understand, to plan. Myra, on the other hand, thrived in noise. She moved through the world like a headline. Loud, polished, impossible to ignore. That was part of what drew me to her in the beginning. Her energy, her drive, her refusal to be anything less than formidable. When she landed the senior executive role at Darlington Group, a tech firm that called itself a revolution in motion, she treated it like a crowning achievement. And it was, in many ways. Myra had fought tooth and nail for that position, for the corner office, the staff that answered to her every need, the parking space with her name on it. She made it. At least, that's what she told herself. But here's what she didn't tell anyone. I was the one who funded Darlington's seed round. 8 years ago, when Myra was just a manager at a mid-tier agency and the founders of Darlington were just two scrappy coders with a dream and a broken MacBook, I saw something in their pitch that made sense. I cut a check. A big one. Quietly. I never asked for a seat on the board. I didn't want headlines. I just wanted to build. Myra never knew how deep my involvement went. She thought I was in consulting. That's the word she used when people asked what I did. Oh, Julian? He's in consulting, she'd say with a dismissive smile, the same one she used when she corrected a waiter or shut down a subordinate in meetings. She didn't want me to be part of her brand. My existence had to be digestible, neatly packaged, safe. I let her have that. For a long time. Because love, at least the kind I believed in, wasn't about needing credit. It was about seeing someone win and knowing you helped them rise, even if no one else knew it. But something changed over the years. Not in the company. In her. Myra began curating her image like a product launch. Her Instagram became a highlight reel of brunches, panels, and power moves. Her captions read like TED Talk scripts. Never dim your light for someone else's comfort. If they don't clap when you win, let them go. She started referring to our shared milestones as her sacrifices. She told stories that made her the hero, and I was either the silent supporter or not mentioned at all. I try not to care. I told myself the image wasn't the person. That late at night, when it was just us and the world was quiet, she'd still reach for my hand in bed. She'd still whisper goodnight. And that meant something, didn't it? But the silence I once cherished started to feel more like erasure. Not just in public, but at home too. The decisions Myra once made with me became announcements. We're going to Cabo next month for the Founders Retreat. I RSVP'd us for the gala. I told them you might help with setup. I was no longer part of the plan. I was background. Set dressing. A placeholder in a story that no longer needed me. Until the invitation came. It was delivered by courier, thick envelope sealed with Darlington's embossed gold logo. Myra left it on the kitchen counter without a word, nestled beneath a pile of design magazines and catalogs. Like I wouldn't notice it. Like it wasn't meant for me. I picked it up anyway. Darlington Group Quarterly Gala, celebrating legacy and leadership. She hadn't mentioned it. No save the date. No discussion. Just silence. I waited until dinner to bring it up. She was slicing into her salmon, glass of wine half gone. Gala next Friday? I asked. She barely looked up. Yeah, you don't have to come if you're busy. I set my fork down. I wasn't invited, was I? Myra hesitated. A flash of guilt flickered in her eyes, too quick for anyone else to catch. But I'd studied her long enough to know. I mean, technically, +1s are allowed, she said. But it's mostly work. Networking. You'd be bored. Is that why you didn't mention it? She sighed, as if I was the problem. Julian, it's just not your world. You don't even like those events. She was right. I didn't like being paraded. But that wasn't the point. That night, I sat in my home office, looking over the shareholder documents I'd kept locked away all these years. I ran my fingers over the Darlington logo, the signatures that gave me quiet power. I had always chosen to stay in the background, but that didn't mean I belonged there. So I pulled out my tuxedo. I RSVP'd myself as a guest. And for the first time in 8 years, I decided to step into the room, not as Myra's husband, not as a catering volunteer, not as a shadow, as Julian Hart, the man who built it all while no one was watching. And this time, they were going to see me. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the bedroom, adjusting the cuffs of my black dress shirt, when Mira walked in. She gave me a once-over with eyes that flickered somewhere between surprise and calculation. She hadn't expected me to dress up. I could tell by the way her gaze lingered, slightly too long, like she was trying to decide whether to say something nice or pivot to criticism. "You're actually coming," she said flatly, like the idea had only just become real to her. I said I was. I replied, reaching for the jacket that matched the deep charcoal slacks I'd laid out earlier. "You never withdrew the +1, so I figured I'd claim my spot." She folded her arms and leaned against the doorframe, her expression unreadable. "Well, don't say I didn't warn you. It's not going to be your kind of crowd." "What kind is that?" I asked, looking her straight in the eye. "The kind that talks in acronyms and IPOs. The kind that works 80-hour weeks and takes conference calls during dinner," she said, her tone now clipped. "You don't need to prove anything." I smiled then, not because of what she said, but because she had no idea that her words confirmed everything I'd suspected. She didn't just want me out of the room. She wanted me out of the picture. And that made me even more certain I needed to show up. The gala was at the Hudson Glasshouse, a venue Mira had always gushed about. She once said if she had known about it earlier, she would have held our wedding there. I remember nodding at the time, sipping my drink, trying not to flinch at the way she erased the place we actually got married, her words, a casual rewrite of history. The venue was all polished chrome and floor-to-ceiling windows. The skyline glimmered behind clusters of sharply dressed professionals. Everyone had perfect posture and expensive cologne. Mira moved through them like she belonged. Air kissing, laughing lightly, her voice a smooth current in the high tide of networking chatter. She didn't introduce me. Not once. At first, I hung back, took in the crowd. I wasn't trying to cause a scene. I wasn't ready to. Not yet. I just wanted to see how deep this theater ran. And Mira? She played her role flawlessly. About 20 minutes in, she looped back to me with a small smirk and said, "Come with me for a sec." I followed her toward a curtained-off hallway. She handed me something folded, dark, and fabric. I opened it. A vest, with the Darlington logo embroidered on the chest. "What's this?" "You said you wanted to come," she said sweetly, brushing non-existent lint off my lapel. "So help out. Just pour drinks or something. At least you'll have something to do." My jaw tensed. I looked down at the vest, then up at her. She wasn't joking. Her smile was tight and smug, like she'd just turned me into an obedient prop in her show. Like she'd found the perfect way to remind me who the night really belonged to. "Seriously? It's either that or sit around awkwardly all night," she said, stepping back and glancing around to make sure no one important saw this moment. "Just blend in." I took the vest, not because I accepted it, but because I knew what was coming, and I wanted to let her believe she was winning just a little longer. I made my way to the bar. The real staff looked at me with some confusion, but I nodded politely and started pouring. Red wine, white wine, a few of the basic cocktails. I knew how to handle a shaker. Years ago, I used to bartend while building my first investment fund. I never forgot the rhythm of it. Ice, pour, stir, smile. Someone spilled a bit of their drink near the corner, and I went over to help mop it. That's when I met Kendra. Myra's work bestie, a sharp-cheeked woman with a voice that could slice through glass. "Oh my God, you're Myra's husband, right?" she said, laughing as I wiped near her shoes. "She said you were in, what was it? Consulting?" "Something like that," I replied, keeping my tone pleasant. "Well, this is adorable," she chuckled, pointing to my vest. "You're really committed to whatever this is." Someone behind her, one of the younger software architects, I think, snorted. "Myra's husband is serving drinks now? Damn. Power couple in reverse." I smiled. I actually smiled, because their laughter meant nothing. It was shallow, fleeting, and none of them knew who I was yet. I returned to the bar, kept pouring, kept watching. Every so often, I'd glance over at Mira. She never looked back. She was too busy dazzling. Her boss, Gregory Lang, stood beside her, laughing in that fake cordial way executives do when their futures depend on keeping the right people happy. She leaned into him, whispering something in his ear. They both laughed. I caught enough to know I was the punchline. Honestly, she whispered, not realizing I was close enough to hear. He's lucky to be invited. He doesn't understand my world. Gregory nodded. As long as he keeps you happy. I didn't flinch. Not outwardly, but inside. The fuse had officially been lit. I poured another glass, handed it off, and looked out at the sea of curated perfection. She'd gone so far out of her way to make me invisible, and in doing so, had forgotten the first rule of power. The quiet ones? The ones you underestimate? They're the ones who always know where the exits are. And the locks. I stayed behind that bar longer than I needed to, partly to keep up the illusion, partly because I liked watching the performance unravel without them knowing a thing. I chatted with guests. I let them assume. I kept pouring. Then I checked my watch. It was almost time for the big announcement Mira had been hinting at for weeks. Something about new directions and deep gratitude for their success. And in that moment, I knew exactly how I'd reclaim every inch of space she tried to shrink me out of. I didn't need revenge. I needed revelation. They would all know my name. And not because Mira handed it to them. Because I was about to take back everything, with a smile and a microphone. The night swelled around us like a carefully tuned orchestra. The clink of champagne flutes, the muffled beats of background jazz, the occasional ripple of laughter over industry jargon and six-figure deals. I stood behind the bar, vest still on, hands still moving. If anyone had looked closely, they would have seen how steady they were. I wasn't angry. I wasn't nervous. I was patient, controlled. I'd waited years to be underestimated this thoroughly, to be hidden in plain sight while the people around me performed their self-importance with choreographed precision. At exactly 8:45 p.m., Mira took the stage. Spotlight shifted and landed on her like she was born for them. She walked up to the podium in a sleek, metallic dress, silver with structured shoulders, bold and blinding. People clapped, some even whistled. She smiled that perfect, rehearsed smile. The one that made her look grateful without seeming soft. She tapped the mic twice. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for being here tonight as we celebrate the incredible growth, innovation, and impact we've made at Darlington Group over the last quarter. A few cheers rose from the back. Someone yelled, Queen Mira, and a wave of laughter followed. She basked in it. Let the praise settle around her like perfume. Then she launched into her speech. She spoke of long nights, strategic partnerships, sleepless weekends, sacrifice. She name-dropped board members, gave shallow praise to mid-level directors. She talked about Darlington as if she had built it brick by brick, with her own bare hands and some divine spark of genius. What she didn't mention, not once, was me. Not the investor who took the risk when Darlington was just a slide deck and a dream. Not the man who funded its survival through 3 near failures and 1 painful restructure. Not the partner who stood quietly in the background while she used the front row. I leaned against the side of the bar, arms folded, listening as she said, success doesn't happen in silence. It happens in boldness, in courage, in vision. That one stung, but I didn't let it show. The applause swelled as she raised her glass. To all the visionaries in the room, thank you for building this future with me. She toasted the crowd. People mirrored her, clinking glasses with excitement and entitlement. I took a sip from a bottle of water behind the bar. Mira stepped off the stage, clearly pleased with herself. She made her way toward Gregory Lang, her boss, her mentor, and, if the rumors were even half true, her biggest fan. I noticed the way she leaned in again. The way her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, just loud enough for those close by to hear, including me. Honestly, she said with a chuckle, he's lucky to be invited. He doesn't understand my world. Gregory, smug and pink-faced, gave a knowing nod. As long as he keeps you happy. And then Mira turned her head. She saw me. For just a second, her eyes met mine. And in that instant, I saw something flicker in her expression. It wasn't guilt. No, she'd left that emotion behind a long time ago. It was discomfort. The cold realization that I'd heard her. That I wasn't as far away. Or as checked out as she'd hoped. But she didn't flinch. She just gave me a half-smile. The kind people give their doorman when they forget the name. I smiled back. Full. Confident. The kind of smile that says, you just stepped into my office. Gregory turned to raise a glass in my direction. To the man of the hour, he said jokingly, clearly not realizing what he was implying. Nice purse tonight. A few people laughed. Mira laughed too, tight-lipped and sharp. Let's hope he sticks to cocktails and not quarterly reports, she added, just loud enough to sting. I nodded once. Said nothing. Let it sit. It was important they stayed this unaware. The greater the performance, the greater the shock. A younger guy, probably from marketing, wandered up to the bar and nudged me. Hey, man, you're killing it back here. Seriously, best margarita I've had at one of these stuffy things. Are you with a catering agency? I looked at him for a beat too long. You could say that. He nodded, completely missing the undertone. Nice. Well, if you got a card, I'd love to bring you on for some private events. I smiled again, handed him a drink, and said, You'll be hearing from me. 10 more minutes passed. I checked my watch. 9:15, I knew what was coming next. A surprise announcement Mira had hinted at for weeks. Something about deep appreciation for the people behind Darlington's success. The irony made my teeth ache. From the edge of the room, I spotted the event coordinator speaking with a Darlington director. She glanced toward me, toward the bartender, and I saw her nod. Time. I slipped off the vest, folded it neatly, and placed it behind the bar. Then I walked calmly toward the side door that led to the events operations office. I'd already coordinated with the real host weeks ago, through a business associate who owed me a favor. All I had to do was give the signal. The lights dimmed slightly. A single mic illuminated on stage. And just like that, the room shifted again. The MC, a thin man in a velvet jacket, tapped the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special announcement this evening. A surprise guest. A man whose quiet investments helped birth what Darlington Group is today. The original believer. The one who funded the dream. Please welcome Mr. Julian Hart. The silence was thick, like the breath before thunder. I stepped out from the shadows. And Mira turned around. Her smile froze. Her hand clutched her glass like it might shatter. Gregory blinked twice. Julian Hart, he repeated, as if trying to match the name to the man he'd seen pouring his drink 30 minutes ago. Mira laughed nervously. Wait, my husband just happens to share the same name, but I was already walking to the stage, already straightening my cufflinks, already halfway to the mic. The MC stepped back. I took the mic in one hand. The lights warmed my face. I looked around the room and let the silence stretch just long enough for people to shift uncomfortably. Thank you for the warm welcome, I said calmly, voice steady. And Mira, thank you for letting me help tonight. It's been illuminating. I smiled gently. The crowd was dead quiet. And that was only the beginning. The silence that followed my words wasn't the stunned kind. It was surgical, heavy, clean, like the room collectively forgot how to blink. Mira stood frozen near Gregory Lang, her eyes darting between me, the microphone, and the branded vest I had left folded at the bar. For a woman who prided herself on controlling every narrative, she looked like someone who just realized the story had been rewritten, without her permission and right under her nose. I let the silence hang a few more seconds. Not because I was savoring the discomfort, though part of me was, but because silence has weight, and tonight, I needed every word to land like thunder. I scanned the faces in the crowd. Some looked confused, others amused, and then there were the few who began to realize they'd missed something important. Like Kendra, who now wore a stunned kind of respect, the same way a gambler looks at someone who bluffed and won the pot with a pair of twos. Most of you know Mira Hart, I said, finally continuing, Darlington Group's powerhouse. The face of innovation, the voice of vision, the relentless force behind the company's growth. And she deserves every bit of that recognition. But tonight isn't just about Mira. It's about all the people who built this foundation, those you know, and those you've never seen. I glanced at Gregory Lang. He wasn't smiling anymore. And if I may reintroduce myself, my name is Julian Hart. I'm not just Myra's husband. I was the first investor in Darlington Group. I took a leap before your favorite seed round article hit TechCrunch. 8 years ago, when the pitch deck was made in PowerPoint and the business plan fit on a napkin, I believed. Murmurs swept through the room like wind through dry grass. The kind of noise that's more dangerous than a shout, because it meant the audience was now alive, alert, awake. And Mira? Mira had gone pale. She still had the flute of champagne in her hand, but her fingers gripped it so tightly I was sure it would snap. Gregory took a step forward, his expression attempting a save. "Wait, you Julian Hart? You're that Julian Hart?" I gave him a tight nod. "The very one. We've exchanged emails through intermediaries over the years. I never made it to the board meetings because, well, I didn't need a seat to steer a ship I already owned." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I didn't let him recover. Not yet. I've been content staying behind the curtain, watching this company grow, watching the team evolve, watching Mira shine. But I think it's time for some clarity. Tonight marks a new chapter. I've decided to expand Darlington Group's leadership team, starting with a restructuring process I believe will set us up for the next decade of scale. That was the real bomb. The restructuring. The kind of word that makes executives sweat and mid-level managers check their inboxes the next morning with trembling hands. I looked at Mira then, really looked at her. She was no longer performing. She wasn't posing, smiling, or calculating angles. Her eyes met mine, and behind them, I saw fear. Not of me, but of the truth. She had built an entire world pretending I was a footnote, and now she was realizing I had been the author all along. "I'll be releasing a formal memo tomorrow," I said, lowering the mic just slightly. "But tonight, I just wanted to say thank you. To all of you. And to Mira, thank you for letting me help." The last line was deliberate. I even said it the way she'd said it earlier in the evening, when she tossed me that branded vest like it was a towel for the help. I saw a few faces twitch, a few mouths cover poorly concealed grins. As I stepped off the stage, Mira took a step forward, as if to intercept me. But her heel wobbled slightly, she was rattled, and the glass finally slipped from her hand. It shattered on the marble floor. The sound was sharp, sudden, a punctuation mark. Red wine spilled across her designer heels and spread like a stain she couldn't erase. Gasps rippled through the room. "Mira," Kendra called, moving to help her, but Mira didn't move. She just stood there, hands still out, staring at the mess like it spoke louder than I did. Gregory made a show of trying to help too, but his eyes were elsewhere, on me. Measuring. Recalculating. "Julian," he said cautiously, "had we known." I cut him off with a simple wave of my hand. "You'll get the memo in the morning." I kept walking. No fanfare. No gloating. Just the quiet certainty of someone who didn't need applause to know they'd won. As I passed the bar, the same young guy who'd asked if I catered private events gave me a stunned nod. "Dude, you really undersold yourself." I shrugged. Just blending in. Behind me, the party struggled to reboot. The music stuttered. Someone tried to restart a toast, but the mood had shifted. The illusion had shattered right alongside Myra's glass. Outside, the air was cooler than I remembered. Crisp. Clean. I unbuttoned the jacket I'd worn under the vest and walked toward my car parked a few blocks down. I didn't need a limo or a chauffeur. I needed distance. Perspective. As I slid into the driver's seat, my phone buzzed. A text from Mira. What the hell was that? I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have words, but because for the first time in a long time, silence wasn't something I had behind. It was a message all its own. There's something fascinating about watching a lie crumble in real time. It doesn't fall all at once like in the movies. No, it buckles at the corners first. Hairline fractures you only notice if you're paying close enough attention, if you've lived in the shadow of the lie long enough to recognize its flaws. That night, Myra's lie cracked wide open the moment that glass slipped from her hand and shattered against the marble floor. The red wine, Merlot, I think he spread slowly across her shoes, her hem, the pristine tile, like a stain blooming in silence. No one rushed to mop it up. No one said a word for what felt like a full minute. Just eyes, all on her, and by extension, on me. I didn't turn back. I didn't gloat or stay to see who would offer her a napkin or awkwardly whisper support into her ear. The moment was over. My message had been delivered, and now the real work would begin. The next morning, I showed up at the Darlington Group offices. Not through the back elevator or a side conference room, but through the front entrance with the name, Julian Hart, already updated on the building's access panel. The security guard gave me a look like he recognized me, but couldn't place me. I smiled and nodded. "Good morning," I said, heading to the 24th floor. It was 8:32 a.m. Mira usually arrived closer to 9 o'clock. I wanted the first 30 minutes. I wanted the quiet before the office figured out who I was. I walked through the open concept space filled with glass partitions and steel accents, passing assistants who greeted me like I was a new vendor or a very overdressed IT guy. In the executive wing, I found her office. Door closed. blinds drawn, her name still engraved on the brushed metal plate outside. Mira Hart, Executive Vice President. I took a breath, tapped the door once with the back of my knuckles, and entered without waiting for permission. She was there, early for once. Still in the same heels from the night before, but with a blazer thrown over a silk blouse. No makeup. Eyes swollen from a night of unanswered questions in a mirror she likely didn't enjoy facing. "You had no right," she said before I even fully stepped inside. I closed the door gently behind me. "I had every right. You ambushed me." "I corrected the record," I replied, walking toward the desk. I didn't sit. I wanted her to feel the full weight of my presence. "You embarrassed me in front of my team, in front of my boss, in front of the same people you let believe I was a bartender?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She stood, slowly, her hands braced on the edge of the desk like she needed to steady herself. "I didn't mean to. It wasn't supposed to go that far." "No," I said. "It wasn't supposed to go public." Mira turned away, walked to the window like she couldn't handle the way I was looking at her. I used to love watching her when she stood like that, strong back, chin slightly up, like the city was hers to command. But now it looked like someone bracing against the inevitable. "This was my job, Julian. My place. You should have let me handle it." "And what exactly were you handling?" I asked quietly. "Your image? Your lie." "It wasn't a lie." "He doesn't understand my world?" I quoted. "You said that. To Gregory. To your friends. You told them I was lucky just to be invited." She turned then, slowly. Her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name shame, maybe. Or fury. Sometimes they look the same on someone who's been exposed. "You made me look weak." "No, Mira," I said calmly. "You made me look weak. For years. And I let you. Because I loved you. Because I wanted to see you win, even if I had to lose quietly." She stepped closer. "So what now? You're going to kick me out? Strip everything away? What? Fire me in front of the company?" I reached into my coat and pulled out a sealed envelope. Set it on the desk. "I'm offering you a role in community outreach. Entry level. A chance to rebuild." Her laugh was bitter. "You're demoting me?" "I'm giving you a choice," I said. "You can walk away, or you can stay and learn what it means to build from the ground up, like I did. Like we all had to." She stared at the envelope like it was radioactive. "This is petty." "No," I replied. "This is balance. You were the face of this company, Mira. Now I need someone to be its heart." She shook her head, stepping back like she couldn't believe any of this was real. "You can't be serious. You start Monday." And with that, I turned and walked out. The reaction spread through the building before noon. No memo was needed. Eyes followed me now. Respectful. Curious. The smirks were gone. Even Gregory Lang's assistant sent over a meeting request titled "Private Follow-Up with Mr. Hart." For once, no one laughed when they said my name. Later that evening, I received a call from one of the partners I'd helped recruit during the Series B funding round. He congratulated me, told me how long he'd waited for this shift. "It's poetic," he said. "She kept saying you were in consulting." Well, this is the most brilliant consultation I've ever seen. I hung up and stood in the middle of the foyer at home. Mira wouldn't be coming back there, not the same way. She'd signed the deed over in our early years, back when we were building a future instead of a brand. I walked past the pictures she'd hung, past the awards she displayed, and straight to the wall of family photos. There she was, Mira in Paris, Mira at the launch party, Mira at the ribbon cutting. Center stage in every frame. I didn't take them down. I just replaced the center photo with one of the company's original team. A blurry, grainy image taken in a rented office space, with pizza boxes in the background and joy on our faces. Mira wasn't in it. She hadn't even shown up to that shoot. Said she was too busy working on her own future. And now, she'd finally caught up to it. On Monday, she'd walk into Darlington's main building. No heels. No boardroom. Just a cubicle and a purpose. And for the first time in years, maybe she'd start seeing what she lost while chasing what she thought she needed. The drive back from the office was quiet. I took the long route, not because I wanted more time to think, but because silence had become its own kind of bomb. No podcasts. No music. Just the steady hum of the tires on pavement and the gentle reminder that for once, the world wasn't asking me to rush. Mira had left earlier through a side exit. She didn't want to face anyone else that day, not after our conversation in her office, not after that envelope slid across the desk like a verdict. I didn't blame her, but I didn't feel sorry for her either. The mansion stood still when I pulled into the circular driveway. The lights were off, the curtains drawn. Myra's car was parked out front, like always. But this time, she didn't wait inside with a glass of wine and a strained smile. She sat on the front steps, in that silver blazer from earlier, her heels in her hands, bare feet on the stone. I parked, killed the engine, and just watched her through the windshield for a moment. The powerful executive who once commanded stages and boardrooms now looked like a woman who didn't know which door to walk through. I got out and walked up slowly. She didn't look at me right away, just stared out toward the fountain, the sound of water echoing in the night. "You changed the locks?" she asked quietly. "No," I replied. "Didn't see the need." She looked down at the heels in her lap. "It doesn't feel like mine anymore." "It never was," I said, not cruelly, just honestly. She flinched at that, just slightly. But she didn't argue. "I found the envelope," she said. "The one in the drawer." I nodded. She meant the documents. The deed. The prenup. All the fine print she skimmed when we were younger, when I was just a sweet guy with vision, and she was too busy to care about the legal stuff. "You signed it," I said. "I know." We sat in silence for a moment. The kind of silence that swells with everything that hasn't been said, with years of smiles that masked frustration, with dinners where we chewed our food and bit our tongues. She rubbed her thumb against the heel of her shoe like she was trying to scrub something off it. "Why didn't you ever tell me," she asked, "that you own the house? That you own the company?" I took a breath. "Because you never asked." "That's not fair." I turned to face her. "Isn't it? When's the last time you looked at me without scanning for what didn't match your image? When did you last ask what I was building or what I wanted?" She swallowed hard, eyes shining now in the porch light. "I was trying to become something. I didn't want to be married to someone people pitted. And I didn't want to be married to someone who needed the world more than she needed the truth," I said, standing now. "But we both made our choices." She stood too. "So what now?" "You're kicking me out." "No," I said. "You're free to stay. For now. But not in our bedroom. I'll be in the guest house." She blinked. "You're serious?" I nodded. 30 days. That's what the clause says. That's what you gave me." Her face crumpled, just slightly. "That was never supposed to apply to us. Neither was a marriage where I wore a vest and poured drinks while my wife pretended not to know me." Her eyes filled then, but no tears fell. Mira wasn't one to cry in public. "Even when the public was just me. I wanted you to be proud of me," she whispered. "I just didn't think you'd do it like this." I didn't reply. I stepped past her, unlocked the door, and held it open. She walked in slowly. The house felt different now, colder, like it had inhaled too much truth to go back to pretending. Inside, she paused near the entryway, staring at the large canvas photo we'd hung the year after our honeymoon. Mira on the cliffs in Santorini, arms wide, hair caught in the wind. I wasn't in the frame. She'd said it looked cleaner that way, more timeless. "I've been so scared," she said softly, not facing me, "of losing everything." I set my keys on the table. "Then you should have thought about what everything really meant." She turned to me then, raw and stripped down. "No armor, no makeup, no audience. I don't want to be your enemy, Julian. I don't need you to be," I said. "But I also don't need you to be my ghost." She didn't respond, just walked toward the stairs, heels still in hand, her bare feet making soft thuds on the hardwood. I watched her go. That night, I stayed in the guest house. It was quiet, no footsteps above, no echo of her laugh from the kitchen. I laid on the smaller bed and stared at the ceiling, wondering how a home can stay so still while everything inside it breaks. In the morning, she was already gone when I walked back to grab some files. Her coffee mug sat in the sink, lipstick faint on the rim. A small act of normalcy in a house that no longer had any. I looked around the living room. The throw pillows she obsessed over. The curated stack of books on the table. The candles she never lit. And I realized something. This place was never a home. It was a stage. Now, the show was over. And I was the one holding the script. Mira tried charm first. I knew she would. That's the version of her people loved, polished, poised, persuasive. 3 days after I moved into the guest house, she came to the door with a tray of croissants, fresh coffee, and that slight arch to her brow that used to mean something far more intimate than breakfast. She knocked gently, like she wasn't the woman who'd spent years minimizing my presence in her life. "Thought you might want something warm," she said when I opened the door. She wore a soft robe, not the silk one she'd parade around in, but the cotton one, the one she used to wear when she curled up beside me to read. I let her in, sat across from her at the small table. The croissants were from her favorite French bakery. She never used to let me eat pastries without some comment about carbs. Now she was offering me two. We talked, sort of. Small things. How quiet the house had felt lately. How the mail had been building up. I let her fill the space with pleasantries while I waited for the turn. The reason she'd come. I've been thinking, she finally said, maybe we could reevaluate the role you assigned me. There it was. I didn't even blink. Community outreach is a vital role. She smiled tightly. Julian, come on. You know it's entry-level. You think I belong there? I think it's a good place to start, I said calmly. You said you wanted to rebuild. Start here. I said I wanted to fix things with you. Not run the alumni newsletter. You said you wanted respect, I said, pushing the tray slightly away. Respect doesn't come from titles, Mira. It comes from truth. Her mouth hardened, but she stood and nodded, gathering the tray like she hadn't really come for conversation at all. She paused at the door. You think humiliating me makes you strong? No, I said. I think giving you a second chance makes me kind. She didn't come back the next day. Instead, she tried seduction. I came home late from a board dinner and found her in the living room, lights dimmed, wearing the same red dress she wore the night I first told her I loved her. Music played softly. Sam Cooke, one of my favorites. She turned, holding a glass of wine, that practiced smile on her lips. Remember this dress? She asked. I nodded. I remember the woman in it. She moved toward me slowly, hand grazing my arm. She's still here. Just lost her way for a bit. I stepped back, gently. Not cruelly. Mira, you said once that love shouldn't need to be proven. That if someone really sees you, they won't ask for performance. I believe that. Her face faltered. So what now? You're just done with me. I'm done being someone you use to make yourself look complete. Her expression shattered then, and I saw it for the first time, not the anger, not the pride, but the fear underneath. The version of Mira who wasn't composed or in charge. Just the woman who was terrified that all her image-making had left her standing alone in a house filled with mirrors. She didn't say anything else that night, but 2 days later, the rage arrived. It came sharp, unfiltered, and without ceremony. I was walking into the Darlington building when she caught up to me at the elevator. You made a fool of me, she said, eyes wild. You humiliated me in front of everyone. I let the elevator doors close before I answered. No, Mira. I just stopped shielding you from the reflection. She pointed a finger at me. You wanted to ruin me. Don't pretend this was noble. If I wanted to ruin you, I said slowly, you'd already be out of this company, out of that house, and out of every social circle that still returns your calls. I gave you grace. You just never recognized it. She didn't follow me upstairs. Instead, that afternoon, her nameplate was quietly removed from the boardroom wall. No announcement. No ceremony. Just gone. A few of the staff noticed, whispering about it near the elevators. Kendra, in particular, looked like she didn't know which side to land on anymore. 1 minute, she was gushing over Myra's leadership. The next, she was complimenting my vision in meetings. By the end of the week, Mira reported to a new desk. No window, no assistant, no private lounge access. Just a workstation near the interns, a phone line, and a company email account that no longer auto-forwarded to the executive server. And the photos? That was the final unraveling. Darlington had a wall, what they called the legacy calendar. A row of framed photos showing key milestones, key players. Mira was in 8 of them. Launch parties, press tours, award galas. Always front and center, always mid-laugh, hand on someone's shoulder like she owned the room. I ordered new prints. The design team was quiet when I gave the directive. They didn't ask questions. They just nodded and returned a few hours later with a box. I stood in the hallway myself when they took the old frames down. I held them in my hands. Saw the woman I once loved in every picture. Beautiful, commanding, alone, even when she was surrounded by people. I kept one, the very first one, before the PR makeover, before the tailored speeches. She was smiling genuinely in that photo, head tilted, hair messy, holding a clipboard and laughing at something off camera. I slipped it into a drawer in my office. When Mira walked by the wall later that day, she stopped. She stared at the new calendar, new faces, new moments. Her absence was loud. She turned slowly and caught my eye through the glass door. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just nodded once and kept walking. That night, I stood in the hallway of the house as she packed more boxes. She wasn't rushing, just folding dresses she no longer wore and jewelry she hadn't touched since the gala. She saw me there, leaning on the doorframe. I wanted people to respect me, she said, and I became someone I didn't even respect. I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. She picked up a small velvet box, our wedding bands. She opened it and stared for a moment before closing it again. "Do you still see me, Julian?" she asked. "I always did," I said. "You just stopped seeing yourself." Then I stepped aside. She walked past me, slow and quiet. That night, I slept harder than I had in years. Not because it was easy, but because for the first time, the silence didn't feel like hiding. It felt like healing. Mira didn't leave right away. She lingered like perfume in a closed room, still present, still clinging to the air, but fading more each day. Her suitcases stayed stacked by the front door for a week. Not packed sloppily, but arranged like decor. Almost like she was waiting for someone to ask her to stay, for someone to tell her it wasn't really over. But no one did. Not me. Not the neighbors who used to gush over her garden parties. Not the friends who once begged for invitations and reposted every curated moment from our lives. The house, which she had once moved through like royalty, heels clacking confidently against marble, silk robes trailing behind her, felt different now. It was quieter, more still. She wandered from room to room like a visitor. She stopped making noise when she walked, like even her footsteps were apologizing. And she'd started doing something new, pretending. She'd step out onto the balcony with her phone pressed to her ear, pacing, nodding dramatically. But when I passed by one day and her phone lit up, screen dark, no call in progress, I knew. It was all for show. She didn't want the neighbors to see her fall. She wanted to look busy, wanted to look important. But importance doesn't survive silence. And the silence in that house had become deafening. She kept trying to reclaim parts of it. Rearranging pillows, buying new candles, fixing the fresh flowers that used to arrive every Monday. But they all wilted now. She'd throw them out and replace them, again and again, like she could cheat decay if she just arranged things beautifully enough. I didn't interfere. I stayed in the guest house, made my coffee there, did my calls from there. It had everything I needed: peace, space, and the ability to watch Mira realize, in real time, that power isn't about who people believe you are. It's about who you are when there's no one left to perform for. One evening, I walked into the main house to grab some old project files I'd kept in the study. She was sitting on the stairs, barefoot, hugging her knees like a child trying to disappear into herself. She didn't look up at first, just sat there, staring at the floor. "I got a call from Kendra today," she said quietly. I paused, halfway to the study. "Yeah." She asked if I was coming to the Founders Circle dinner next month. And I asked. She said she assumed I wouldn't. Then she mentioned you're giving the keynote. That didn't surprise me. I hadn't announced it. The committee had. They wanted someone who had built from the roots, not someone who had borrowed the fruit. I fit that theme better now. Mira didn't argue. She wanted to know if we were still close, Mira added. I didn't know what to say. I sat on the stair opposite her, a few steps down. "We're not enemies," I said. "But we're not pretending anymore either." She nodded, eyes flicking to a framed picture on the wall above us. It was the one of us in Cape Town, laughing, wind in our hair, the sea behind us. She got that photo blown up after it made a splash on her social media feed. Thousands of likes, dozens of comments, couples goals. And yet, I remembered that trip differently. I remembered her glued to her phone the whole time. I remembered the fights between the photos. "You used to smile like that," she whispered. "I still do," I said. "Just not with an audience." She looked away then, biting her lip to stop it from trembling. "I used to think this house meant we'd made it," she said. "That if I could just walk through the front door and feel the marble under my feet, I'd know I wasn't her anymore." Her. My mother, she said. The woman who couldn't pay the mortgage. Who cried in the kitchen with the lights off because she was scared someone would see her fall apart. I promised myself I'd never be her. And instead, I asked. I became someone else I don't recognize, she said. Someone who doesn't cry in the dark because she doesn't cry at all. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. She stood up slowly, brushing off her sweatpants like they were made of silk. "I'm leaving Sunday," she said. 30 days are almost up." I nodded. She turned to walk away, but paused again. "I won't take anything that isn't mine." That would be the first time, I said before I could stop myself. She didn't flinch, just nodded like she deserved that one, and maybe more. On Saturday, the movers came. Not the expensive ones she used to brag about, the ones with monogrammed uniforms and GPS-tracked crates. Just a simple team with a dented van and gloves that had seen too many stairwells. She gave them instructions, boxed everything herself. No tears. No ceremony. I watched from the window of the guest house as she packed the last box into the trunk of her car. She stood there for a moment with her hand on the roof, staring back at the mansion, not like she was sad, but like she was confused about where the years had gone. Like she'd arrived at the wrong destination and only just realized she was the one driving the whole time. She walked up to the porch, knocked once on the guest house door. When I opened it, she handed me something small. The old house key. Worn. Bent slightly near the teeth. I don't need this anymore, she said. It was never mine, really. I took it, nodded once. You'll be okay. I hope so, she said. But this time, I want to be okay for the right reasons. She walked away. Didn't look back. The gate clicked shut behind her like a chapter ending. No fanfare. No applause. Just the low growl of her car engine disappearing down the road. That night, I stepped into the main house again. It was still. Furniture untouched. Pillows fluffed. But the air was different. No scent of her perfume. No soft echo of heels on the marble. Just the space. The bones. The foundation. I walked to the wall where she used to tape up her vision boards. There were still faint pieces of old Scotch tape, like ghosts of ambition. I peeled one off and smiled. Maybe she'd come back one day. Not to live, but to visit, different. Whole. Maybe not. But for the first time in years, the house finally felt like mine. And more importantly, so did I. I didn't want to do the interview. Not at first. The producer, a soft-voiced woman named Elise with a talent for timing, reached out 3 times before I finally agreed. Just a conversation, she'd said on the phone. Not a scandal expose. Just your story. I'd laughed when she said that. My story. For years, no one had even asked my name at events unless it was to confirm Myra's husband had parked correctly. But something about the way she said it, the invitation without pressure, stuck with me. And after everything had unfolded, I figured maybe it was time I stopped whispering my truth and said it aloud. We recorded in a small studio tucked away in the city's West End. Nothing flashy, just 2 chairs, a mic between us, and a camera crew that barely made a sound. I wore a plain navy sweater. No tailored suits. No watch flex. I wanted this to feel real. Grounded. Not a performance. Elise started soft. Asked about my background. My early days working odd jobs to save for seed investments. She was good at what she did, listened with intent, steered the conversation gently. And for the first 30 minutes, it was like a dam opened. I talked about building in silence. About risking everything on Darlington when all I had was instinct and an unshakable belief in the product. I talked about the people who told me I was crazy, about the months I lived off canned soup and stretch-thin rent, about how every success Myra claimed as her own had started in my late-night spreadsheets. Then came the part she'd been circling from the start. And your marriage? She asked gently. There's been a lot of talk recently about what went on behind the scenes. I didn't flinch. I took a breath, nodded. I loved her, I said. Let's start there. I loved Myra when we had nothing but hope. I loved her through every stage of becoming. Even when she started to disappear behind the version of herself she thought the world wanted. Elise leaned forward slightly. So why keep everything secret for so long? Your role, your ownership, your influence. Why stay in the shadows? I looked at the floor, then back up at her. Because I wanted to see who'd love me when I had nothing to prove. That was the line. I didn't know it at the time, but when the episode dropped 3 days later, that was the clip that went viral. That sentence, cut with perfect timing, my voice low, the music swelling underneath it, landed like a quiet truth in a world of noise. It started on Twitter, then Instagram, then LinkedIn, of all places. Some people build with you. Others just pose for the pictures. Another clip. Another wave. The views passed 10,000, then 50, then 100. Comments poured in. From young founders. From husbands. From women who said they'd never considered the quiet one in the relationship before. Suddenly, I wasn't just Julian Hart, the man behind the money. I was a symbol. Of quiet strength. Of reclamation. Of someone who didn't need to scream to be heard. My inbox flooded. Podcasts. TEDx talks. Investment forums. People wanted more of the man who watched from the background, then walked into the frame without raising his voice. Mira saw it too. I knew she would. The internet doesn't let you look away, not when you're still on its radar. She texted me the morning the clip hit 3.2 million views. I deserve that. Just those words. No defenses. No sarcasm. I stared at the message for a while before I responded. You deserve the truth. I just finally gave it to you, out loud. She didn't reply. But a few hours later, I received a package at the guest house. No note. Just the framed photo from our Santorini trip. The one that used to hang in the main hallway. She must have taken it with her when she left. But now, it was back. I didn't hang it up. I didn't throw it away either. I stored it in a box in my closet. A reminder. Not of her, but of what happens when you let silence replace sincerity. 2 weeks later, I hosted a charity gala. It was the same type of event Mira used to dominate. Elegant, high-profile, full of people who measure worth in net figures and applause volume. But this one was different. I didn't want glamour. I wanted intention. We raised $600,000 for underserved youth programs in tech. I poured drinks that night, too. Just for a few minutes. Just for fun. One of the guests, a CFO from a Fortune 500 company, raised a glass and said, "You're the CEO with the steady pour, huh?" I laughed. Something like that. And then someone else said, "You made silence a strategy." But it wasn't a strategy. Not really. It was survival. It was patience. It was knowing that not all storms require thunder, some just need time. After the event, I stepped out onto the rooftop terrace, the city glittering below. Elise joined me. She smiled, sipping a club soda. "You changed a lot of minds with that interview," she said. "I didn't mean to," I replied. "I just stopped protecting the lie." She nodded. Sometimes that's all it takes. A few feet away, someone was playing a slow jazz set. The kind of music that makes you feel like things might turn out all right, even after everything's fallen apart. And in that moment, I realized something. This peace, this clarity, this ability to stand in a room and feel full without needing to dominate it, that was mine. I had earned it. Not through revenge. Not through dominance. Through presence. Through truth. And finally, through voice. The first Monday after the interview aired, I walked through the front doors of Darlington Group, not with a performance in mind, but with purpose in my chest. There were no flashing cameras or fanfare, just people, employees, interns, executives, who now looked at me a little differently. Not with fear, not with exaggerated admiration, but with the kind of quiet, level respect that lands only after the truth settles into people's bones. I passed by the reception desk. Lisa, the front desk manager, gave me a wide smile and a coffee I hadn't even asked for. "Black. 2 sugars. Right," she said. I nodded, grateful, and continued toward the elevator. On the ride up, a junior product manager leaned in slightly and said, "I saw the clip. The one about silence. My dad sent it to me. Said, this is what integrity looks like." I thanked him without making it awkward. That was the thing now. I didn't need to explain myself. The story had already done that. People finally saw me for who I was, and ironically, it was by not trying to be seen that they noticed. When I stepped off on the executive floor, I passed the conference room where Myra's photo once hung. The new board wall looked clean, honest, balanced. Some of the original staff had been restored to it, faces who'd done the heavy lifting behind the curtain for years without applause. I told the team we were resetting the culture. No more crown chasers, I'd said in the last executive meeting. Only builders. I reached my office and settled into the chair behind the glass desk, the skyline draped behind me like a reward. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt present, and that was more valuable than anything else. Later that afternoon, we hosted a mid-quarter town hall in the Central Lounge. There were nearly 200 employees on site that day, with more dialed in remotely. The entire room had a different energy now. Not nervous, not transactional, but open. I walked on stage without a cue, without scripted notes. Just a stool, a mic, and a glass of water. "I used to stand in the back of these rooms," I said, not because I was shy, but because I believed the loudest person wasn't always the wisest. I still believe that. But silence, real silence, is only meaningful when it's not hiding truth. They were still, attentive, not because they feared me, but because they understood the weight of what had happened. The kind of transformation that doesn't come from quarterly results, but from accountability. I won't waste your time with fluff, I continued. We're restructuring how we value people here. Titles will mean less. Execution will mean more. Image will matter less. Integrity more. And every department will have a direct line to leadership, not through filters, not through applause, through substance. I took a breath and smiled. Now, that said, the wine at the holiday party will still be excellent. That got a laugh. A real one. I ended with this. I believe in quiet strength. But let me be clear, if you ever feel unseen in this company, speak. Your voice matters. And if no one listens, come find me. I promise, I will. The applause that followed didn't feel like fanfare. It felt like agreement, like trust. After the town hall, I wandered into the event prep space where staff were organizing for a charity auction we were sponsoring the next weekend. I picked up a tray, helped move some folding chairs, and cracked a few jokes with the volunteers. They seemed caught off guard at first. The CEO was handing out name tags and adjusting light settings. But I liked it that way. I liked reminding people that leadership doesn't float above, it walks among. That evening, we held a private fundraiser in the rooftop lounge. Only key investors, board members, and a few select guests were invited. I wore a simple black blazer, no tie, no cufflinks. Just a bottle of wine in hand and the easy confidence of a man who no longer had anything to prove. I made the rounds, poured drinks, laughed lightly with the old-school board members who used to mistake me for Myra's assistant. Gregory Lang came up to me midway through, drink in hand, looking unsure whether to smile or stand at attention. "Julian," he said. "That was quite a month." I raised my glass. "Clarity usually is." He chuckled weakly. "I underestimated you." "I know," I said. "That's what made it work." He nodded and walked off. That was enough closure for me. Just before the night ended, I found myself alone at the bar with one of the new scholarship interns, a 19-year-old named Darnell from Brooklyn. He'd been shadowing the product team all month and asked to meet me. "I watched your interview 3 times," he said. "The way you said, some people build with you, others just pose for the pictures, man, that hit. My mom cried watching it." I smiled at him. That line wasn't meant to hurt anyone, just to remind myself what kind of man I want to be. He looked down. "I want to be that kind too." "You already are," I told him. "Just keep listening. And don't let silence turn into self-erasure." He nodded slowly, then smiled like he'd been handed something bigger than advice. I stayed after everyone else left, cleared a few glasses, tossed napkins. The bartender tried to stop me, said, "Mr. Hart, we've got this." But I shook my head and kept wiping the counter, because I remembered what it felt like to pour for a room that laughed at me. And now, I poured for the memory, not out of revenge, out of return, out of full circle. That night, I walked back into my home, my actual home. The air felt different now, balanced, no tension hiding in the corners. I poured myself a single glass of wine and sat on the back porch, the city lights flickering behind the hedges. I thought about Mira. Not with hate, not even with sadness, just with clarity. We'd written a long chapter together, but I was writing a new one now, and this one was mine from the first word. The cables tangled at my feet like a nest of indecision, the modem blinking steadily as I tightened the last connection. Another fix, another quiet victory. I crouched in the corner of our home office, Vivian's awards crowding the walls, her degrees framed and spotlighted, like curated museum pieces. Mine? A dusty shelf held my prototype router and the faded sketchbook where Signal Core began. No fanfare. No accolades. Just me and my belief in what I built. Vivian used to say I had vision, but it was the kind of compliment you give a child with finger paint. Safe, distant, and utterly without faith. She never said it in front of her friends. Never in public. Out there, she held me like a handbag, something functional, acceptable, but never worth discussing at length. I'd grown used to it. Not numb, but practiced. Her father, Franklin, had never hidden his disdain. He wore it like his cufflinks, polished, deliberate. "Quinn, you're wasting your life on that. Experiment," he'd say, like Signal Core was a childish science project, not a network optimization tool quietly powering 4 major e-commerce platforms. I didn't correct him. I learned early that explaining value to someone invested in your failure was an exercise in futility. Vivian adored him. Her world orbited his approval, and she worked damn hard to earn it. Ivy League graduate, finance awards, features and tech executives to watch. And every single time she was praised, I clapped the loudest. Because I loved her. Even when she smirked at dinner parties after I shared a development breakthrough, calling it cute, I swallowed the bitterness. I told myself it was just her way of coping with pressure. Even when she introduced me as the guy with all the ideas but none of the luck, I let it slide. Because I believed in us. And more importantly, I believed in what I was building. Signal Core wasn't just another hopeful app or gimmick. It was a silent backbone, an invisible accelerator hiding beneath bloated systems and inefficient code. I designed it to be the skeleton no one saw, but everyone relied on. I modeled it after myself, in a way quiet, essential, overlooked. Most nights, while Vivian reviewed acquisition deals or prepared pitch decks in her curated glass office, I worked in the garage. My hands cramping from the soldering iron, my eyes blurring after hours of testing compression ratios and latency thresholds. My version of romance was debugging during thunderstorm surges so our beta clients wouldn't drop signal in a power flicker. I didn't expect applause, but I hoped for respect. We used to talk more. Back when she still wore flannel to bed and stole fries from my plate. Before the heels got higher, and the titles grew longer, and our marriage became a branding exercise. I remember one night, she stood in the kitchen, hair tied back, holding a wine glass she hadn't sipped. "You could be huge, you know," she said, quietly, "if you just had a real business partner. Someone to polish the edges." I laughed then, more amused than hurt. "You mean someone who wears better suits and doesn't have solder burns?" She smiled, but didn't deny it. That was months ago. Lately, her compliments had turned into calculations. How scalable is it? What's the burn rate? What's the long-term exit strategy? As if I were a pitch deck she was forced to skim. I answered, not to impress her, but to remind myself I had answers. And yet, even with the silence, even with the quiet dismissals, I held on. Because love, real love, isn't loud. It's not flashbulbs or Instagram-worthy moments. It's staying, believing, pouring coffee at 2 a.m. because she has a call with Singapore, or rewiring the breaker because she tripped at running 6 monitors at once. Still, I'd be lying if I said the cracks weren't spreading. One night, I overheard her on the phone. "He's supportive, but not ambitious. You know? Like, he's fine being average. I think he likes being invisible." Her voice was hushed, but not enough. I sat in the dark hallway, gripping a box of Ethernet cables, staring at the closed door. Invisible. The word burned more than I wanted to admit. I didn't confront her. What was there to say? She wasn't wrong. I had been invisible. I let her cast the light, thinking it was love, thinking that my silence was strength. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. I looked at Signal Core's server logs that night with new eyes. The metrics weren't average. We'd cut data delivery lag by 28% across 3 test markets. Our tech had survived 4 DDoS attacks without a single drop. One of our anonymized modules had been quietly integrated into a health records platform used by 2 major hospital networks. And nobody knew. Because I hadn't told them. Because I played small. Because I let their spotlight blind me into thinking my shadows meant nothing. Not anymore. That night, I stayed up until dawn mapping out a new structure. Shell companies. Licensing strategies. A stealth network of clients. I started using a pseudonym, QMLock, for all new partnerships. The name sounded like someone who didn't wait to be introduced. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't care if Vivian noticed. Because whether she saw me or not, I had decided to be undeniable. And shadows, after all, only exist when something's standing in the light. The valet barely acknowledged me when I pulled up in the black Honda Civic. I caught the brief flick of his eyes toward the Bentley in front of me, then back to me like I was a mistake in the parking lot. I handed over the keys anyway, straightened my tie, her favorite blue one, and walked toward the Stratmont rooftop, where the party lights pulsed against the skyline like a heartbeat made of glass and steel. It was Vivian's big night. Senior partner. Tech acquisition lead. A title so heavy with prestige it practically bent gravity. I should have felt proud. I should have felt included. Instead, I moved through that rooftop like a ghost walking through a world that didn't see him anymore. The air smelled like money, imported champagne, dry-aged sliders, perfume brands I couldn't pronounce. Her firm had spared no expense. Gold-rimmed flutes, live string quartet, rooftop heaters glowing like little artificial suns. It was the kind of party meant to whisper, "You've arrived," into every camera lens. I adjusted my sleeves, took a breath, and walked in. She saw me across the space but didn't come. She smiled that small, camera-ready smile and gave me a nod, polite, distant, like I was the barista who remembered her order but nothing more. I tried to tell myself it was because she was working the room, strategizing, networking. But then the introductions began. Vivian floated from circle to circle, her voice charming and confident. This is Javier from London. He manages our AI analytics team. A kiss on the cheek. This is Priya, our wizard in fintech deals. A gentle hand on the arm. Oh, and this, she turned slightly, the way she always did before the lie, this is, well, you must already know Nathan. He's the one who brought us that German cyber defense acquisition. Laughter. Applause. I wasn't introduced. Not once. Even when I stood directly beside her as she greeted an incoming executive from Zurich. This is she paused, barely glancing at me before redirecting, sorry, give me 1 second. I just need to check on the bar setup. She brushed past me like wind. I watched her gold heels disappear behind a waiter balancing a tray of shrimp ceviche. I moved to the edge of the rooftop, letting my fingers wrap around a glass of something expensive and tasteless. From that vantage point, I could see the whole city, its glittering chaos, its indifferent sprawl. I used to dream of moments like this. A room full of polished people, clinking glasses over shared ambition, nodding at me like I belonged. But in this crowd, I was invisible. I checked my phone. No messages. I opened the Signal Core dashboard out of habit. Live systems looked good. Ping rates optimal. 2 new requests had come in through Trintel Systems, our anonymous defense front. I closed it. I wasn't here to work tonight. I was here to support my wife. When she finally returned to my side, it wasn't to acknowledge me. It was to refill her drink. She leaned in and whispered, "You should smile more. People are noticing." I blinked. Noticing what? That you're sulking, she said, already turning. This is a celebration. Don't ruin it. I smiled. I smiled like I had rehearsed it in a mirror 100 times. I nodded and sipped my drink. I watched the way she laughed with Franklin, her father, who stood by the corner fireplace like he owned the sky itself. He spotted me and raised his glass, barely. A gesture so small it might have been accidental. I didn't return it. Then came the toast. It started with clinking glasses. A soft chime spreading through the rooftop as servers passed around fresh champagne. I saw her step onto the small riser they'd set up near the ivy-covered wall, her golden dress catching the light. She looked radiant, powerful, unstoppable. She cleared her throat. Thank you all for coming tonight. This moment means everything to me. I've dreamed of leading a division like this since my early days in finance, and to stand here tonight as Stratman Capital's newest senior partner and tech acquisition lead, it's overwhelming. Polite applause. Smiles. Camera flashes. I want to thank my team, she continued. I scanning the crowd like she was painting it with validation. Javier, Priya, Nathan, you are the heart of this machine. My father, Franklin, you've always believed in me. Another pause. And finally, she turned toward me. I want to thank my biggest challenge, my husband, Quinn. Heads turned. You've shown me exactly what not to do in business. Laughter. Actual laughter. It started in pockets, then rippled outward, slow and cruel. She didn't flinch. Which is why I'm thrilled to announce she held her glass higher that Stratman Capital is acquiring Signal Core and folding it into our firm under a new leadership structure. My breath stopped. I froze in place, not because of the words, but because of the timing. With real leadership at the helm, she added. More laughter. Even louder this time. Franklin smirked, nodding like he'd just closed the deal of the year. My mouth went dry. My hands felt disconnected from my arms. I didn't say a word. I didn't storm out. I didn't throw the glass or shout or demand the microphone. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the truth. She had rehearsed this. Maybe for days. Maybe with Franklin's help. Maybe this whole party was never about her promotion. It was about my erasure. I set my glass down on the edge of the table. It wobbled for a second but didn't fall. Then I smiled. The same kind of smile I used to give her when we were poor and hopeful, when we dreamed of changing the world together. But this smile had weight. Purpose. I turned and walked off the rooftop. No one followed me. No one called my name. I was just a silhouette slipping between bodies and balloons, laughter still ringing in my ears like gunshots in an empty room. By the time I reached the parking lot, the valet had already brought my car around, probably hoping for a tip. I handed him $5 without looking up, climbed into the Civic, and pulled away from the tower of glass where she stood on a fake stage in front of borrowed power. Let her toast. Let them laugh. I had code to write. A system to protect. and a name no one saw coming. The sound of laughter stuck to me like wet paint. I could still hear it as I drove home, each mocking chuckle and echo in my head, bouncing off everything I thought we'd built. The lights of the city blurred through the windshield, but I wasn't crying. I wasn't even angry yet. I was empty, like someone had pulled the plug and let everything drain out of me all at once. Vivian's voice played on loop. My biggest challenge, my husband, Quinn. You've shown me exactly what not to do in business. And then, like a dagger twisted for sport, which is why I'm thrilled to announce we're acquiring Signal Corp and folding it into our firm, with real leadership at the helm. I had been publicly executed without a bullet. Just a smile. Just a toast. I parked 2 blocks from our house. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to wake the neighbors with the sound of the garage door. Maybe I just needed to feel the cold bite of night air in my lungs. I walked slowly, every step sinking with the memory of someone's laughter. I think it was Franklin's. That short, satisfied huff of amusement he used to give when I dared to share ideas at dinner. He never believed in me. And now, he'd helped orchestrate my fall. I unlocked the front door as quietly as I could. The house was dark, which meant she wasn't home yet. She'd still be basking in applause, sipping champagne, probably telling some hedge fund manager how gracious I'd been about the acquisition. I stepped into the kitchen and stood in the silence, the hum of the fridge the only sound, low and even, like a lifeline. I didn't flip the light on. I didn't need to see the pictures on the wall or the neatly stacked awards on the shelf to remember what this place had become. Hers. I sat at the kitchen table, pulled my laptop from my bag, and opened Signal Corp's dashboard. Everything was green. Stable. Active. Productive. Our clients, real clients, were still using our core systems. If they'd felt even a tremor in performance, we would have heard about it in minutes. But they didn't. Because nothing had failed, except the illusion that I was small. Vivian thought Signal Corp was weak because I never paraded our wins. I kept our biggest contracts private, behind layers of NDAs and protective shells. What she never knew, what no one in her smug circle of asset managers and acquisition vultures knew, was that Signal Corp had been restructured under a different parent name, Trintel Systems. That little experiment she thought she could fold into her firm? It didn't belong to me anymore. Not on paper. I'd sold controlling interest to a silent board composed of 3 longtime friends, tech veterans, and angel investors who believed in what we were building. I kept my position as founder and chief architect, but the shares were split. The real value was hidden where no acquisition team would think to look. She didn't know that one of our modules had just gone live within Stratman's infrastructure 6 weeks ago, under a license agreement brokered by Trintel, not Signal Corp. She didn't know that her firm had already signed a 5-year license for our security framework, which meant any attempt to absorb us would violate contract law and trigger default penalties her firm wasn't prepared for. She didn't know, because she never asked. But tonight changed things. She hadn't just embarrassed me. She declared war. I sat there, bathed in the soft blue light of the laptop screen, and started writing. Not code. Not emails. A plan. A map. A step-by-step breakdown of exactly how to respond without ever raising my voice. First, a press release. Not a direct rebuttal, no. That would look emotional, reactive. No, this would be a quiet unveiling of Trintel Systems' new partnership with the Department of Defense. Just a small blurb on tech sites tomorrow morning, noting that we've been awarded a development contract for encrypted civilian military communications infrastructure. Enough to catch attention. Enough to make Stratman's legal team freeze. Then, a timed update to our investor dashboard, reflecting our most recent valuation, $180 million. Audited, verified, and recorded. Far beyond what Vivian or Franklin had ever imagined. I kept it quiet on purpose. Let the world think we were struggling. That way, they wouldn't see the pivot coming. I drafted a second document. An internal letter to Trintel's board suggesting we send a formal cease and desist notice to Stratman Capital if they referenced any integration of Signal Corp without formal negotiation. I didn't hit send. Not yet. I just wanted to know it was ready. By the time I heard the front door open, the plan was already outlined. My coffee had gone cold, and the first hints of dawn were threatening the edges of the windows. Vivian came in humming, the click of her heels sharp against the wood floors. I didn't turn. I didn't need to see her face. "Oh," she said casually when she saw me. "You're up." I didn't respond. She walked to the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water, and leaned against the counter like nothing had happened. It was a good night, she said. Everyone loved the toast. Everyone except the person it was about, I said quietly. She sipped. Oh, come on. You know how these things go. It's just optics. I turned to face her then. Slowly, calmly. You called me a liability. She rolled her eyes. It was a joke. Lighten up. You announced the acquisition of a company you don't own. I will own it, she said, setting the bottle down, her tone clipped now. Our team already filed the paperwork. Stratman will handle everything. You'll get paid. I don't need your buyout, I said. Signal Core isn't for sale. She laughed. Actually laughed. Quinn, you're adorable. You don't have a say anymore. You signed the IP over to the company, right? And if you didn't, well, your name's still on everything. It'll come back to you in court. We've got a legal team that wins for sport. I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because this was the moment I realized she truly didn't know. I don't own the IP anymore, I said. It's under Trintel Systems. She blinked. Signal Core is a shell now. The real product, the modules, the platform, the architecture, it's housed elsewhere. And it's protected. Her smile faltered. And as of tomorrow, Trintel will be publicly announcing our defense contract. So if Stratman even breathes the word acquisition again, you'll be hit with national security violations and contract breaches. Your firm's lawyers will be too busy explaining themselves to the Pentagon to worry about me. She stared at me, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I saw something crack. Not fury, not arrogance. Fear. You're bluffing. I stood, picked up my laptop, walked past her. You called me a dropout. A joke. You used my name as a punchline in your big moment. But what you didn't realize, I said as I stopped at the stairs, is that while you were celebrating your climb, I was building the mountain beneath you. I didn't wait for her reply. I went upstairs and closed the door behind me. She'd thrown the first stone thinking I wouldn't throw back. She was wrong. The house was silent by the time I returned to my desk. The faint creak of floorboards above me told me Vivian had finally gone to bed, probably after downing 2 glasses of wine and staring at the wall. She didn't try to stop me when I walked away earlier. Didn't follow. And that silence? It was a new kind of victory. Not loud, not explosive. Just quiet confirmation that I'd finally stepped out of her spotlight and into my own. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because I had too much to do. When your enemy believes they've already won, that's the best time to finalize your endgame. And I had no intention of letting her strike twice. I opened 3 windows on my screen, Signal Core's backend, Trintel's legal directory, and the secure message portal we used with the Department of Defense. Every keystroke was deliberate, each tab a piece of armor being SEC. Vivian thought she had pulled off a corporate coup, that by announcing the acquisition of Signal Core during her toast, she'd created a momentum that couldn't be reversed. But what she didn't know, what no one in that perfectly lit rooftop crowd knew, was that Signal Core was no longer the core. It was a skin, a decoy, a name built to be underestimated. The real operations had shifted months ago into a restructured and renamed entity, Trintel Systems. Back when I realized that she was more interested in folding me into her corporate ascent than building with me, I started taking steps to protect what mattered. I'd brought in 2 of my most trusted contacts, David Ling, a cybersecurity savant who'd once ran encryption for a major telecommunications firm, and Kira Maddox, an IP attorney whose last 3 cases ended in corporate settlements totaling over $70 million. We met under the guise of a garage startup refresh. What we actually did was engineer an invisible migration. Bit by bit, every part of Signal Core, its code, its assets, its infrastructure, was relocated and secured under Trintel. The licenses? Renegotiated. The server locations? Obscured. Ownership? Reassigned to a trust managed by Kira's firm. And Vivian had no clue. I logged into Trintel's client portal and reviewed the recent activity. The Department of Defense had finalized their onboarding checklist. Encryption testing was scheduled for Friday. A second module for remote infrastructure reinforcement was flagged as high priority by another client, a Fortune 100 energy firm that had quietly contracted us through a third-party vendor. Trintel's reach was growing, and the most powerful part? It looked like a whisper on paper. Just another supplier in a sea of invisible architects. I opened the embargoed press release, the one I'd prepared weeks ago in case Vivian, or someone like her, tried to make a move. The headline read, Trintel Systems secures defense contract for civilian encryption infrastructure, cites breakthrough in low-latency security transmission. Beneath that, the draft contained a brief but potent paragraph. The company, co-founded by technologist Quinn Locke, has maintained a low-profile presence while pioneering encryption frameworks currently deployed across finance, healthcare, and defense. No boasting, just facts. Enough to make Stratman Capital pause. Enough to make any firm that considered an acquisition think twice. I scheduled the release for 10:05 a.m. Eastern. Not too early. Just enough time for Stratman's team to begin their morning with coffee and a heart attack. After locking the release, I turned to the acquisition terms. Not the ones Vivian smugly slid across the table in that rooftop joke of a deal. No, these were real terms. Drafted by me. Only this time, they weren't for Signal Corp. They were for Stratman's cybersecurity assets. Through a shell company, I had quietly bought up several key patents their division had failed to renew on time, oversights from a team too busy with champagne to notice what was slipping through their fingers. Those patents? Now held by Trintel. That gave us legal leverage to pursue acquisition of the entire portfolio if we wanted. And I wanted. I sent a message to Kira. All systems prepped? We're ready. She replied in under a minute. They'll panic. Don't blink. I didn't plan to. By 4:30 a.m., I was running simulations through our internal load test. I watched as virtual users pushed every corner of the infrastructure, looking for cracks. None appeared. The systems held. Resilient. Secure. More than I could say for the house I lived in, where the woman upstairs had planned my professional funeral behind a clink of glass and polite applause. The bitterness tried to creep in, but I wouldn't let it. Not now. Not after everything. I didn't need revenge. I needed precision. Control. The kind of control that only comes when you stop trying to explain yourself and start letting your results do the talking. I stood, stretched, and walked to the kitchen. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee Vivian liked hers strong, with almond milk. I took it black. Always had. I set her mug down on the counter just as I heard her footsteps on the stairs. She came down in her silk robe, moving like nothing had happened. Her face was composed, calm, like she convinced herself that last night was just branding strategy, not betrayal. She looked at the mug, then at me. You didn't sleep. No, I replied, sipping my coffee. Had some things to take care of. She eyed me cautiously, sensing something off but not able to place it yet. I figured we'd talk this morning. About the merger. There won't be a merger, I said plainly. Her smile tightened. Quinn, be reasonable. Reason left the room the second you used me as a punchline, I said, walking past her. You wanted the world to laugh at me. You didn't think I'd already prepared a statement of my own. She turned to follow me, her eyes flashing. What are you talking about? I pulled up the scheduled release on my phone, tilted it toward her. This goes live in 5 hours. Trintel Systems. Defense contract. Public exposure. The whole world will see what you tried to absorb without understanding. She read the headline, then again slower. Her face shifted. Anger, confusion, then dawning realization. Trintel is yours? Trintel is mine, I said. And so is everything that powers your division. Without my license renewals, Stratman can't legally deploy half the tools it uses in client networks. Her mouth parted, but no sound came. I told you once, I continued, voice low and steady, that you can't build empires on people you don't respect. You didn't listen. You built yours on the idea that I was forgettable, that I wouldn't fight back. She gripped the counter. You're going to ruin me. No, I said. You ruined yourself. I just stopped protecting the lie. The clock on the wall ticked past 5:12 a.m. The sky outside began to pale at the edges. A new day forming. A different one. One where I wasn't the man behind the scenes anymore. One where I no longer watched her from the shadows, waiting for a scrap of recognition. I walked back to my desk and closed my laptop. My work was done for now. Upstairs, she was still standing by the coffee. Silent. Finally seeing the difference between the man she mocked and the man she underestimated. And while she slept off the last of her delusion, I had already built the firewall that would keep her world out of mine forever. The next morning began like a performance. At precisely 9:01 a.m., the glass doors of the private office suite slid open with a hiss, and Vivian walked in as if she'd rehearsed the entrance. The heels, those red-bottom ones she wore for big deals, clicked sharply against the marble floor. Her charcoal gray deal dress, hugged her frame in all the right ways, and her eyes sparkled with the sheen of confidence that came from believing the world still bent in her favor. Behind her was Franklin, postured like a war general inspecting enemy territory, flanked by two attorneys I recognized from Stratman's litigation department. None of them smiled. "Morning," she said sweetly, sliding a crisp, leather-bound folder across the conference table. "You're going to love this deal, Quinn. I promise." I didn't reach for the folder. Instead, I tapped a key on my laptop, bringing the large wall monitor to life. The screen lit up with my desktop, orderly, deliberate, waiting. I looked up at her, and then at Franklin, who gave me a nod that was more dismissal than greeting. They thought I was cornered. They thought this was just a formality. They'd show up, serve me their acquisition proposal, and walk out with my life's work. And maybe even my signature on a severance agreement if they were generous. I could practically feel the smugness radiating off them. Vivian leaned forward, like she was about to sell me a dream. The terms are generous. Full absorption of Signal Corps into Stratman's tech division. You'll walk away with a cash payout, vested equity, and a year of advisory consultation. Think of it like getting paid to do less. Franklin added, "You're lucky we're offering anything after what you pulled with that press release." Spooked a few board members. I tilted my head. It wasn't meant to spook. It was meant to inform. Franklin snorted. "Don't play coy. That announcement was calculated. You blindsided us." "No," I said, finally sitting back. I protected what was mine. Vivian's eyes narrowed, just slightly. I could tell she hadn't expected calm from me. Rage, maybe. Defensiveness. But not this. I nodded at the monitor. "Let me show you something." Slide 1. Signal Corps' current valuation. $180 million. Verified by 2 independent audits and supported by recent infrastructure license sales. I watched Franklin's brow tighten. Slide 2. The client list. Not names, of course, we protect those. But the logos of their parent companies told the story. 3 Fortune 100s, 2 in Europe, 1 stateside. I let them read. Let the silence stretch. Then slide 3. The Trental Defense contract, signed, sealed, classified. But the contract ID and the government seal were visible, enough to show I wasn't bluffing. I turned the laptop slightly, revealing a browser tab open to Stratman's internal infrastructure audit log. "Your firm's been using our architecture for nearly 10 months, I said. Encrypted packet acceleration, firewall load balancing, and predictive routing. You signed the license through a third-party vendor. Our tech already runs behind your systems." Vivian's mouth parted, just slightly. Franklin leaned forward. "You're bluffing." I clicked a file. An email chain from Stratman's internal IT director confirming the integration last November. "Am I?" He stared at the screen like he was reading the terms of his own defeat. "See," I continued, "Signal Corps wasn't failing. It was hiding. And you just tried to buy something that your firm is already renting at a premium." One of the lawyers finally spoke. "Even if that's true, it doesn't protect you from strategic acquisition. You're still vulnerable under standard merger clauses." "I'm not merging," I interrupted, voice calm. "I'm not for sale. But your division might be." Vivian laughed. A short, breathless laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Excuse me." Slide 4 appeared, Trental's acquisition proposal. Not for Stratman itself, but for its cybersecurity portfolio. The language was sharp, and the numbers were precise. "Your firm lost 3 patents last quarter. We acquired them. We own the rights to Stratman's compression cipher algorithm, the idle data diagnostic protocol, and the failure redundancy matrix you're still marketing as proprietary. We sent a courtesy notice this morning. Your legal team will get it in an hour." Franklin sat back, stunned. The lawyers looked at each other, visibly uncomfortable now. Vivian's face changed. That practiced mask began to crack, and for a split second, I saw her reach for the old strategy, charm. "Quinn," she said, softening her voice. "This doesn't have to be ugly. We're partners. We can find a middle ground here." I smiled faintly. "I'm sure we could have. Before the rooftop stunt." She flinched, the memory like a slap. "This isn't revenge, Vivian," I said. "This is correction. You made me the lesson. Now you're living it." Franklin stood up, jaw clenched. "This is war, Quinn." "No," I replied, calmly rising to my feet. "This is business. You're just not used to losing." He stormed out. One lawyer followed. The other stayed behind for a second too long, probably weighing job security versus ethics, then turned and left as well. Vivian stood, but slowly. Her fingers touched the edge of the table like it was the only solid thing left in the room. You played me, she whispered. No, I said, gathering my laptop. You ignored me. There's a difference. She took one last breath, trying to summon her composure. But it didn't come. She walked out without another word. And I stood there, the only sound in the room the gentle hum of the monitor still displaying my final slide. Some threats aren't visible until it's too late. The room felt like a held breath as I advanced the next slide. It glowed across the screen in stark contrast to the mahogany-paneled walls and chrome accents of the boardroom, casting pale light across the confused and increasingly pale faces staring back at me. There were 7 of them now. Vivian, Franklin, the 2 lawyers, and 3 of Stratman's top-level executives who had arrived 15 minutes late and expected a smooth negotiation, not a coup. Slide 1 had already shattered the room's illusion. Signal Corp's valuation was far beyond what they had assumed. Slide 2 had chipped away at their composure with proof of our high-level client base. Slide 3 had introduced the contract with the Department of Defense. Now, Slide 4 would bury them under the weight of what they never thought to question. I clicked again. The screen displayed a countdown timer, 47 minutes and 18 seconds. That's the time left until a scheduled press release goes live across national tech and business media outlets, I said, my voice level. It outlines Trintel Systems' acquisition of 3 patents previously owned and now expired by Stratman Capital. It also highlights our recent federal defense contract, an award that required a thorough security clearance and a federal-level due diligence process your team didn't even know was happening. Silence. Then the scraping of a chair leg as Franklin stood up slightly, only to sit right back down as if realizing he no longer had the right leverage to leave without appearing weak. I continued, slowly, methodically. You came here expecting me to surrender, to hand over a company you assumed was on the brink, a company you believed you could swallow whole with a polished press release and a few term sheets. But you never paused to ask what Signal Corp had become. I looked directly at Vivian. Her expression was unreadable now, not cold, not confident, just calculating. I knew that look. I'd seen it in her eyes when she pitched to investors, when she prepared cross-examinations during her consulting work. It was the face of someone trying to regroup after stepping on a landmine. Vivian, I told you once, I said, tone quieter now, just above a whisper, that what you underestimate will eventually outgrow you. I gave you chances, years' worth. I supported you, built systems while you built speeches. And when you thought you were the sun, you asked me to be a star that only shone when you needed light. But I was building something in the dark, something you didn't even think to look for. Slide 5 illuminated the wall. It showed a simple graph, one line representing Stratman's current projected cybersecurity revenue curve, the other, Trintel's, based on existing contracts and upcoming deals. The lines intersected in 7 months. Then Trintel's line soared past. Verified data. Conservative projections. One of the executives, a tall woman with silver earrings and a sharper mind than the others, finally spoke. These numbers are real? I nodded. Verified by Renshaw and Banks. I'll provide the audit trail. We don't inflate. She turned to Vivian, then back to me. Why are you here, then? Why show us this? Why not let us fall blind? Because I don't want Stratman to fall, I said honestly. I want it to evolve. But not with the people who thought they could steal from me and mock me in public while doing it. Franklin leaned forward now, and I could tell he was still trying to re-establish dominance, still clinging to the belief that men like him didn't lose in rooms like this. Let's talk turkey, Quinn. Everything has a price. I raised an eyebrow. You mean like how my reputation had a price at your daughter's promotion party? Vivian flinched. No, I said flatly. This isn't about price. This is about positioning. I walked around the table slowly, not with arrogance, but with the deliberate calm of someone who already knew the outcome. I placed a folder in front of each person, 7 copies of an internal proposal drafted by my team and reviewed by Kira. The folder title read, Proposed Strategic Realignment of Stratman's Cybersecurity Assets, Trintel Systems Partnership Agreement. Not a buyout, not a merger, a partnership, with Trintel holding 51% control of the cybersecurity division. I watched the expressions change as each person scanned the front page. The lawyer on Vivian's left blanched. The silver earring executive blinked, her jaw tightening in thought. Franklin scoffed under his breath. Vivian didn't react at all. She stared at me, but I saw her hand tighten around her pen. You'll maintain face, I said, voice steady. Stratment won't collapse. This deal keeps the lights on. You'll spin it as a strategic pivot. Trintel brings in the innovation. Stratment brings in the resources. Your shareholders won't panic. And if we say no? Franklin asked, his voice hollow with the exhaustion of someone who knew he had already lost. I clicked the final slide. It wasn't numbers. It was a curated list of emails. Excerpts from internal correspondence where Vivian and Franklin joked about my intelligence, where they referred to Signal Corps as Quinn's hobby, and laughed about me being too naive to know I was being used. I hadn't hacked anything. These were forwarded to me by someone inside Stratment. Someone who'd seen enough. I don't want to release these, I said. But I will. And once they're out, this board won't be deciding anything because you'll all be too busy dealing with a PR meltdown that paints Stratment as a firm that mocks founders while profiting from their innovations. The room stilled. Vivian spoke now. Softly. Carefully. You did all this behind my back. I met her gaze without flinching. You did everything in front of mine. She looked down, as if searching for something to say, some last-minute salvage play, but no lifeline arrived. No one jumped to her defense. Franklin sank back in his chair. And the silver-earring executive leaned forward, finally. I recommend we table this for internal review. But from where I'm sitting, the numbers don't lie. This deal isn't a loss. It's a parachute. Vivian opened her mouth, but no sound came. For the first time, she wasn't the loudest voice in the room. She wasn't even in control of her own board. I gathered my laptop, slid my own folder back into my case, and walked toward the door. Press release goes live in 22 minutes, I said without looking back. I'd have your PR team ready either way. Just before I stepped out, I heard the executive say, get legal on this now. If we can't beat him, we need to be on the right side of this. The doors closed behind me with a soft hiss. And just like that, the boardroom where they planned my funeral had become the venue of their quiet surrender. The sun was climbing higher by the time I returned to my own building. Not just a home office anymore, a proper headquarters. We'd signed the lease on the top floor of an old converted foundry, brick walls and steel beams still scarred with stories from a century ago. Now, it held the heartbeat of Trintel. What once began in my garage had grown into something no one could ignore, not even those who tried to erase me in a single night. As I stepped through the door, Kira was already there, seated in the war room with her tablet lit up and notes flying across the screen. She didn't greet me with a smile she never did during moments like. Because their options are partner with the company that's already eating their infrastructure, or face breach of contract lawsuits, patent disputes, and federal inquiries they can't afford. She glanced at me. They'll spin this as a smart alliance. But we both know what it really is. A rescue. No, she said, setting the tablet down. It's a hostile takeover disguised as mercy. I nodded slowly. That felt more accurate. 30 minutes later, we were joined by David, our systems architect, and June, our head of operations. Each of them knew what was at stake. Vivian and Stratman thought the press release was the final twist in this drama. But it wasn't the end. It was the doorway into the real power shift, one they hadn't even seen coming. Kira passed around folders, digital and physical. We move now. This is the acquisition package for Stratman's cybersecurity portfolio. After last quarter's negligence, their patent lapse cost them major credibility. We've already secured 3 of the crown jewels, Pulse Protect, PhantomNet, and EchoTrace. David tapped his pen. With those alone, we can replicate 80% of their in-house protection suite. But if we pull the trigger on the rest of the division, June finished the thought. We control the market narrative. And that's what this was about now, narrative. Because in business, power isn't just built on contracts and systems. It's built on story. And up until now, Stratman's story was that they were the aggressive, elite firm absorbing startups and stamping their logos over the brilliance of others. They were the ones who picked winners and erased origins. Vivian had spent her career making sure the spotlight only ever fell on her. But now, her story would change. She wouldn't be the woman who ascended. She'd be the woman who underestimated a man too quiet to clap back, until it was too late. We finalized the offer packet. It was structured as a leveraged asset swap, disguised under a licensing extension deal. Clean, surgical. No headlines needed. By the time the press would catch on, we'd own the skeleton of their cybersecurity arm, and Vivian would be giving interviews about strategic recalibration and lean innovation alignment to explain away the blood loss. By noon, we'd sent the paperwork. By 2 p.m., their reply came. It wasn't Franklin. It wasn't one of the board members. It was Vivian. Her email was brief. 3 sentences. Quinn, we acknowledge receipt of Trintle's proposal. The board will accept the terms under the outline structure. There was no apology. No clever closing line. Just surrender. I stared at the screen for a moment, not with satisfaction, but with something heavier. Not regret, but reflection. I remembered the first pitch deck Vivian ever helped me edit. We were still living in a shoebox apartment with cardboard for a coffee table. She had used highlighters on the margins, circled my clunky phrasing, added stars beside lines she liked. You've got something here, she had said back then. You just need someone who knows how to package it. But somewhere along the way, she stopped packaging me and started preparing to replace me. I forwarded the confirmation to Kira. She replied within 5 minutes with a signed digital receipt and a line that made me smile, even if only for a moment. Welcome to your empire. The following morning, Trintle Systems quietly acquired Stratman Capital's cybersecurity division through an asset-based integration agreement that bypassed headlines and lawsuits. By the time the ink dried, their tech stack had been rebranded under our modular framework, and our licensing tags were embedded in over 60% of their proprietary systems. Vivian called me later that afternoon. I considered not answering, but I did. Congratulations, she said. You got what you wanted. I let the silence hang before responding. What I wanted was respect. And if you just waited? No, I cut in. You don't get to rewrite it now. You toasted me like a cautionary tale. In front of your colleagues. Your friends. My name was your punchline. I miscalculated, she admitted, her voice stripped of its usual lacquer. No, I said again. You revealed who you really were. That wasn't miscalculation. That was clarity. She didn't reply right away. I could hear her breathing through the line, like she wanted to scream but couldn't afford to. I didn't think you had this in you, she said finally, quietly. That's the problem, I said. You never did. I ended the call. Not because I hated her, but because I no longer needed her to understand me. The following week, Trintle's silent partnerships began surfacing through a cascade of favorable press leaks. Major outlets picked up the story. Startup secures defense and corporate wins while rival fumbles patents. Quiet tech powerhouse reshapes security sector. There were no quotes from me. Just data, quietly doing what I'd always done, letting the work speak louder than the noise. At a private industry event, I ran into one of Stratman's junior partners. He clapped me on the shoulder, smiling like we were old friends. She never saw it coming, he said with a chuckle. Honestly, Quinn, we all thought you were just her plus one. I nodded. So did she. The man laughed, raised his drink, and wandered off. I didn't follow. I just stood there, looking out over a sea of well-dressed executives, thinking about how close I'd come to fading into the background forever. But I didn't, because I stopped waiting to be seen. And instead, I built something they couldn't ignore. Vivian had the spotlight, but I had the stage. The first cracks showed the next day. Franklin appeared on a niche finance podcast, doing his best impersonation of a man unfazed by a storm. We've entered a transitional phase, he said, adjusting his cufflinks on camera. It's all part of the strategic evolution at Stratman Capital. Our partnership with Trintle Systems allows us to optimize our innovation landscape. He never mentioned me by name. Not once. That would have been an acknowledgement of defeat. Instead, he called it a realignment, like it was his idea all along. The host nodded politely, probably pretending to understand a word of it, while Twitter lit up with side-by-side charts showing the truth. Stratman's cybersecurity branch had been absorbed, not partnered. It was a dismantling masquerading as progress. And behind the scenes, their phones were on fire. By midday, Kira forwarded an email chain that had been anonymously leaked to us. Internal communications from Stratman's middle management, VPs and department leads is suddenly unsure of their job security, wondering how long they had before Trintle started cutting. One thread from a project manager simply read, I thought we were the predators. But the biggest surprise came from Vivian. She didn't show up to the Monday morning debrief her team had scheduled with ours. Instead, she sent a resignation letter. 3 lines long. No excuses. No pleas. Just a formal stepping down, effective immediately, with a standard severance clause request that Kira immediately flagged as denied pending internal ethics review. I read the letter 3 times. This wasn't Vivian's style. She wasn't a runner. She was a strategist, a chess player. If she was walking away from her crown jewel, It meant something deeper had broken. I didn't reply. That same afternoon, Franklin requested a one-on-one meeting. Kira and David offered to join, but I declined. This one I wanted to do alone. Not for ego. For clarity. We met at a neutral location, a corporate club where I once wasn't allowed past the reception desk without Vivian vouching for me. This time, the host greeted me by name. Mr. Locke. Right this way. Franklin was already seated in a private room with dark paneling and quiet lighting, sipping a scotch that looked untouched. His posture was still straight, still practiced, but his eyes had lost their spark. He nodded when I entered. Not out of respect. Out of resignation. Thanks for coming, he said. I assume this isn't a social call. He smiled faintly. It never is in this business. I took my seat across from him, folded my hands on the table. Said nothing. He cleared his throat. You embarrassed us. No, I replied. You embarrassed yourselves. I just stopped covering for it. He nodded slowly, acknowledging the hit. Vivian was wrong. About the toast. About you. She let her pride get ahead of her judgment. I didn't see it at the time, but Stop, I said, holding up a hand. Don't rewrite history now. You saw it. You encouraged it. You clinked your glass. He didn't argue. Just looked down at his drink, swirling it once before setting it aside. She's leaving the city, he said. Moving to Chicago. Her brother's firm made an offer. Different sector. She's going to pivot away from tech. It hit me in a way I didn't expect. Not pain. Not satisfaction. Just finality. She was running because the room she once controlled no longer answered to her. Because her last move in a game she thought she'd won ended with her queen off the board. She'll be fine, he added. I'm sure she will, I said. She always lands on her feet. He leaned forward now, his voice lower, more deliberate. I came here to ask you something. Not as an opponent. As a father. I tilted my head. Careful. That's a role you've never played with me. He didn't flinch. Let her leave with dignity. Don't release the emails. I studied him for a moment. This was the same man who once told Vivian to aim higher when I brought her flowers for finishing her first client pitch. The same man who introduced me as the Wi-Fi guy at a holiday party full of investors. And now he sat across from me, asking for something he never offered me. Mercy. They're already archived, I said. Not released. I don't need them anymore. His eyes flicked up, surprised. Why? Because I've already won, I said. And I'm not interested in scorched earth. I'm interested in building something that lasts. He leaned back slowly. For the first time, I saw respect, not affection, not warmth, but something close to acknowledgement. You're not the man I thought you were. No, I said, standing. I'm better. I left him there with his untouched scotch and an ego too bruised to salvage. Outside, the winter wind cut across my face, sharp but invigorating. I didn't feel heavy anymore. The weight of their doubt, their ridicule, the night spent wondering if love could survive dismissal, all of it was gone. Back at Trental, our team was already preparing for the next chapter. We had more contracts lined up, more hires planned. The silence from Stratman meant they were bleeding, but they weren't stupid. They wouldn't challenge us again. The market had shifted. We weren't the garage experiment anymore. 2 weeks passed before I saw Vivian again. It wasn't in a boardroom or across a courtroom. It was in the most unexpected place, the airport. I was waiting in line at a coffee kiosk in Terminal C, heading to a leadership summit in D.C. to speak on a panel about innovation under adversity. She stood 2 spots ahead of me, her hair shorter now, wearing a simple blazer and flats. She looked smaller somehow, not in stature, but in energy. She turned and saw me. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. I gave her a nod. Nothing more. She stepped aside and waited until I had my drink. I heard you're speaking at the summit, she said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. I am. You'll do well. Thank you. There was a pause. I was wrong about you, she said. You were wrong to me, I corrected gently. There's a difference. She nodded. I've started therapy. I didn't respond. She added, I'm sorry. Not for losing. For what I did to you. How I made you feel. It was the first real apology she'd ever given me. I sipped my coffee. I hope Chicago treats you well. She smiled faintly. Take care, Quinn. And just like that, she walked away. No breakdown. No grand scene. Just a woman who lost the spotlight and finally saw what had been in the shadows all along. Back at the summit, I stood in front of a room filled with executives, founders, analysts. They expected case studies, graphs, numbers. But I started with a single sentence. My name is Quinn Locke, and the only thing more powerful than being underestimated is knowing exactly when to stop asking for permission. The room was silent. Then it erupted in applause. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't revenge. It was rebirth. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived. Heavy cream cardstock with an embossed navy crest and my name. Not just printed, but written by hand. In careful calligraphy, Mr. Quinn Locke. There was no return address on the front, but I already knew where it came from. Stratman Capital, the company that once tried to bury me with a smile, now wanted me to stand at their podium. Inside the envelope was a formal invitation. You are cordially invited to speak at the Stratman Capital Leadership Summit on recognizing overlooked innovation. I reread the line twice, letting the irony settle in. Stratman, the firm that mocked my work, tried to consume it, then surrendered to it, now wanted me to serve as a symbol of innovation they'd championed. No acknowledgement of the war we'd fought. No mention of Vivian. Just a carefully designed rebranding of reality. Kira laughed when I showed it to her. They really think this makes them look progressive, she said. Like they weren't on the wrong side of the story a month ago. They want a redemption arc, I said. And they think I'll write it for them. She leaned forward. Are you going? Absolutely. She blinked. Seriously. I nodded. Not for them. For the ones watching who've been underestimated. For the founders no one clapped for. For the men and women who were told they were wasting time chasing something no one else understood. She grinned. Then let's write a new kind of keynote. The summit was held at the Helix Grand Hotel, the same venue where Stratman used to throw its summer galas. I remember being there once, years ago, standing awkwardly in a rented suit while Vivian introduced me to colleagues with lines like, "He's working on something in tech, very underground." This time, I entered through the speaker's entrance. No name tag. No wait. My assistant had sent my bio ahead, along with my media kit. I was ushered to the green room, where soft leather chairs and bottled water awaited. A far cry from the folding chair by the bar they'd offered me before. The room filled quickly with executives and analysts. The air buzzed with chatter, but not the performative kind I remembered. This wasn't a celebration. It was a showcase. A chance to identify power before it passed them by. And I was no longer invisible. I caught sight of Vivian before I stepped on stage. She sat in the fifth row, center aisle, wearing a navy dress and no jewelry, her hair pulled back. No entourage. No notes. Just her and a quiet expression I couldn't read. She wasn't speaking today. That much I already knew. Her role in the company had been reduced to a consultant title with no direct reports. Franklin had retired last week to focus on wellness, they said, but everyone knew he'd been nudged out. My name was announced. The applause wasn't thunderous. It was measured, curious. Like the audience was trying to decide what kind of man I would be once I stood under the lights. I stepped onto the stage, no notes in hand, no teleprompter. Just me. And every word I'd waited years to say. Good morning, I began. My name is Quinn Locke, and I used to be a silent partner in every room I entered. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I was surrounded by people who were too busy talking to listen. A few chuckles. Mostly stillness. For years, I built systems in the dark. I watched others get credit for the structure I designed. I watched opportunities pass because I didn't wear the right suit, didn't attend the right school, didn't stand next to the right last name. I was labeled a dropout, a placeholder, a man with more ideas than sense. I was locked in now, even Vivian's. But here's what I learned. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Silence doesn't mean consent. And being overlooked isn't the same as being wrong. I paced slowly across the stage. They called my company a hobby, an experiment, something to be folded into a larger, more serious brand. And when I refused to play along, they laughed. Publicly. Proudly. A few heads in the crowd turned toward Vivian. She didn't move. They thought that moment broke me. What they didn't know was that I had already built something stronger than any applause they could offer, a foundation they were already standing on. Now the tension was palpable. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't bitter. I was stating facts. And those facts held power. Signal Corps, and now Trental Systems, operates behind some of the largest infrastructures in the world. We're the backbone no one noticed until the building started to sway. And today, I'm here not to celebrate being noticed, but to remind you all of something vital. I paused, letting the words breathe. Innovation doesn't always look like a pitch deck or sound like a standing ovation. Sometimes it looks like failure. Sometimes it sounds like silence. But if you're building something real, something lasting, it won't need validation. It will validate itself. I stepped back to center stage. So to those watching, those who've ever been dismissed or talked over or underestimated, I want you to hear me clearly. You don't need a spotlight to matter. You don't need applause to be undeniable. You just need to keep building quietly, persistently, relentlessly. Because eventually, the world catches up. I didn't wait for applause. I left the stage just as calmly as I arrived, walking down the steps, past rows of still faces. It wasn't until I reached the end of the aisle that the clapping began, slow, hesitant, then building into something real. But I didn't turn back. Outside the ballroom, I stepped into the hallway, heart pounding in a way that wasn't anxiety but adrenaline. The kind of rush that comes not from proving people wrong, but from finally proving yourself right. Vivian followed a few moments later. She didn't speak immediately, just stood beside me, staring at the wall like it had something more interesting to say. That was powerful, she said. Wasn't meant to be, I replied. It was meant to be true. She nodded. I deserve that. I shrugged. You earned it. A pause hung between us. She turned to me, eyes softer than I remembered. You really built something, Quinn. No, I said. I became something. And for the first time, she didn't correct me. Later that night, back in my office, I watched the video of the speech being shared across social media. Thousands of views. Dozens of captions quoting lines I hadn't planned but spoke anyway. One stood out. It read, "He didn't raise his voice. He raised the standard." Vivian's firm had invited me to be a symbol. Instead, I became a mirror. And what they saw staring back was the man they tried to erase, still standing, still building, and no longer in anyone's shadow. It didn't happen overnight. It never does, no matter how loud the headlines or how sharp the fall of those who once laughed. True victory is quieter than people expect. It's not confetti or fireworks. It's steadiness. It's walking into rooms that once dismissed you and watching the people who built walls pretend they were doors all along. It's hearing your name spoken with a new weight and knowing you didn't beg for it. You earned it. 1 year after the summit, Trental Systems went public. The IPO exceeded expectations by every metric that mattered. Triple valuation. Oversubscribed in under 4 hours. Wall Street Journal called us the ghost architect of cybersecurity, a headline that would have embarrassed me 5 years ago, but now felt accurate in the most poetic sense. We had never chased hype. We'd built beneath it. Beneath the noise, beneath the arrogance, beneath the Vivian Hawks of the world who thought quiet meant irrelevant. I didn't make a speech on IPO day. I didn't ring the bell. I let June handle that, our COO, whose fingerprints were all over the operational miracle we'd become. She stood on the balcony in a simple black suit, smiled for the cameras, and said, "We're just getting started." And she meant it. Trental wasn't about one man anymore. It was a machine powered by people who had once been overlooked, now leading departments that rewrote industry benchmarks. Vivian? She kept her promise and moved to Chicago. She joined a real estate tech firm, something softer, safer, a quieter stage. Occasionally her name popped up in digital features about pivoting in leadership, and once I even saw her listed as a guest panelist at a small entrepreneurship forum. I didn't watch the video, but someone on my team told me she spoke with more humility than they remembered. Maybe that was growth. Maybe it was just bruising from a fall she hadn't seen coming. Either way, I no longer kept tabs. I didn't need to. She was in the rearview now, blurry and distant. Franklin retired completely. No podcasts. No op-eds. Just vanished into whatever gated community would have him. I imagined he still swirled whiskey and told stories that conveniently left my name out. That was fine. I didn't need space in his version of events. I had already reclaimed my own. The house Vivian and I once shared sold to a young couple expecting twins. I left behind a few things. The desk where Signal Core began, the vintage router I soldered by hand, the coffee mug with the faded print that read code like nobody's watching. Artifacts of a man who had been willing to be unseen for too long. I bought a loft overlooking the harbor. Minimalist. Quiet. Peaceful in a way success doesn't usually allow, but I'd earned the right to make noise when I wanted and to choose silence when I didn't. I spent my mornings walking to the office, rain or shine. No drivers. No entourage. Just earbuds and black coffee, thinking about architecture, not just code, but human architecture. The people who stayed. The ones who left. The fragile scaffolding of trust, loyalty, vision. Every founder thinks they'll be judged by what they build. They forget they're just as much judged by who they let build it with them. I brought on 2 interns that year, both from non-traditional backgrounds. One had dropped out of college after her scholarship was pulled. The other used to work construction by day and learned Python by night on borrowed Wi-Fi. I gave them full-time contracts before the year was out, because talent isn't always loud. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it whispers. And I had learned to listen for whispers. At a leadership dinner one fall evening, an older executive leaned across the table and said, "Quinn, you know you could write a book. Make millions more telling your story." I smiled politely. "I'd rather live a better one." He laughed, thinking it was modesty. But I meant every word. See, the victory wasn't the money. It wasn't even the recognition. It was the peace. The kind that sits on your shoulders like sunlight after years of rain. The kind that no headline, no IPO, no applause can deliver. It's when your worth no longer requires explanation. When your story is no longer edited by other people's insecurities. I got a letter around Christmas. Handwritten. The return address said Chicago. It was from Vivian. No envelope perfume. No signature flourish. Just plain paper and ink. "Quinn, I won't take up much space. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what you were building. Not just the code, but the way you held yourself. The patience. The vision. You were never invisible. I just didn't know how to see. I hope this chapter of your life is kinder than the ones I helped write. V." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer I rarely opened. I didn't need the closure, but I appreciated the honesty. Maybe people don't change completely, but some learn how to carry their damage without cutting others with it. That was enough. One night in late spring, I stood by the office window while the city hummed below. Kira came in with a bottle of wine and a tired smile. "You know," she said, handing me a glass, "a year ago today, we were just hoping Stratman wouldn't sue us into oblivion. And now?" I asked. "Now they forward our white papers to clients like they wrote them." We clinked glasses. As we sipped, she added, "You ever think about what would have happened if you'd signed that deal? Let them fold Signal Corp in like they planned?" I nodded. "Sometimes. And I wouldn't have been me anymore." That was the truth of it. Signing that deal wouldn't have just cost me my company. It would have erased the part of me that believed in slow building things. And letting work speak when words failed. And not needing the room to clap as long as the structure held. That was the core of who I was. And I'd rather be the quiet man behind a fortress than the loud one standing on a stage built by someone else. Eventually the lights dimmed, the guests left, the cameras moved on to the next founder to watch. But Trental stayed. Signal Corp stayed. I stayed. And every time I heard someone refer to me as just a dropout or Vivian Hawksex, I smiled. Because I knew something they didn't. They were still using my systems. Still logging into networks I built. Still protected by code I wrote in a garage while they drank champagne and laughed. And that was enough. I didn't just win. I became undeniable.